The first book that my now husband, Jeff, gave to me when we were dating was The Paradox of Choice. In those early days of our courtship, Jeff quickly understood the blessing and burden I felt from the many choices that seemed to surround me. All of this, I felt, was largely due to the hard work of previous generations to create equal opportunities for women. On the one hand, I had a college degree, I had had a corporate job, and I had already lived in a few new places to name as home, Minnesota and then California. And these are things that neither of my parents had ever experienced. On the other hand, I had no idea how to consider my choice-filled future, live in discernment, and feel confident about my choices. An overabundance of choice is still a challenge for the 20-somethings today. And as I shift the focus of my ministry here at FCCB from students to the broader young adult community, I recall the terror and excitement of that age. Young adulthood is defined by that period of time when we are in the early stages of certain life transitions: career, residence, significant relationships or marriage, and possibly faith. The changes that happen in young adulthood are substantial and can lead to some painful outcomes like loneliness, overcommitment to work, separation from former friends, and financial stress. It can be a time of heightened personal needs, but with no structures to meet those needs. Your former support networks might have been left behind when moving from your hometown or graduating college, and new networks have not yet developed in a new place and with new coworkers and neighbors. Adding more pressure to this time, many young adults believe, rightly or wrongly, that they have just this one decade to prove themselves professionally. Other expressions, including one's faith, are easily put on hold. So I imagine that all of you now are reflecting on life in your own 20s. In this wonderful intergenerational mix we have gathered here, we cover many decades over the past 60 years. And although the experiences of our 20s may be different, we have all been in the wilderness at one time or another. That feeling of exile from what was comfortable and easy, that feeling of being uprooted and disconnected from the people, places, and stories that brought meaning to your everyday life. Right here at FCCB, we have a large group of exiles. Recently, I have been reaching out to the 100-plus young adults who have had some affiliation with FCCB during the past year. That number may surprise you, since on any given Sunday, there's probably a handful of young adults in worship. And to make matters more interesting, 25% of that list of 100-plus young adults has changed since May, based on people moving away, such as the Jackie and Curtis Rays and the Adelina and Santi Cañezes. And new folks are arriving or returning to Berkeley, many these days who grew up locally and have just now returned from college. A Sarah Maroney, a Jasper Bash, or Rebecca Crubben-Coates, to name a few. What I have found most telling, young adults live by an incredibly inconsistent schedule. You must have experienced this too. Every week is different based on changing work hours, traveling here and there, visiting family and friends, the ebbs and flows of coursework, etc. The uprootedness. Many young adults change residence each year, if not more frequently. All I can say is thank goodness for networks like Facebook. Otherwise, I would never keep track of where many of these young adults live. Now, as someone who works with for a while now, and even supervises young adults in work projects, I'm a bit unsettled by the uncertainty of it all. And it's not even my life. But more so, I get heartbroken when I see the tremendous gifts in these young adults that somehow can't be applied because of their uncertain and choice-flooded lifestyles. And that was my feeling until I learned about a groundbreaking program at Cal last April. The Student Affairs Information Technology Program, SAIT, it's a little easier, is a shared service center that provides technology services and resources to student customers and staff across the Student Affairs Division. Student teams have responsibilities comparable to full-time professional staff. However, it takes over 100 student staff working in teams to fulfill the responsibilities of 35 full-time career positions. As a result, these young adults have meaningful experiences because the work they're doing is impacting the university, and they don't feel they're wasting their time with busy work. They are granted a high level of responsibility in their teamwork, and they learn by doing. And most profoundly, when they actually graduate, they're able to get hired into positions above entry level. This program works, and it works because the organization broke out of conventional hierarchy and other organizational boundaries. They took significant measures to not only accommodate, but also to create a structure that best utilizes the gifts of young adults while acknowledging the other demands on their lives. It is true that the center hires fewer older adults for career positions, but their presence, their contributions, and the oversight of young staff are absolutely necessary, and they offer exciting, rewarding work. SIAT feeds young adults and older adults in more ways than one. This program has a formative and lasting impact on the lives of its many participants because its underlying value is that everyone's contribution is valuable. I believe that here in our community that we value everyone's contribution, but I don't think that we have done the work to fully live out that value. And I'm the first to admit that I have no idea what that work entails. I did witness that when we had 120-something at our leadership retreat in July, and she had an interesting yet somewhat contrary perspective on music, it wasn't shared. And this was for a variety of reasons that her contribution was not part of the conversation. This is a common occurrence here and in many contexts. What I've come to know and respect is that these young adults have gifts, valuable gifts, like I have never seen before. It's a kind of wisdom and expertise that no previous generation of young adults was granted. And churches, not just ours, but all American churches, need to get creative and step outside our conventional assumptions and dare to imagine new possibilities. Possibilities that feed the hungers of young and older adults alike. I read a fascinating article this week, How Christianity is Being Saved. This was by Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, who identifies himself as a new monastic. He named the hard truth. The empirical evidence says Christianity as we've known it is done. But then followed with a hopeful perspective. This doesn't mean that Christianity is lost. Across the spectrum of denominational divisions, and quite often in outright defiance to left and right divisions, Christianity is getting born again in America. In thousands of little communities that are mostly overlooked, people are being stirred by the Spirit to lead a different kind of life. It's a life that doesn't make sense if the gospel isn't true. But because these people have somehow gotten the truth of God's story deep in their bones, their life does make sense. This Rob Bell quote states the quandary. Exile is when you forget your story. How do the exiled young adults remember their story? And how might the truth of God's story seep into their bones? Again, I claim I don't have the answer here, but I share with great interest that of the many young adult programs discussed among my young adult team, the house party idea gets the most buzz. Listen carefully because this involves everyone here. The house party idea is gathering in the homes of older adults who have established residences and enjoy hosting people for meals and for conversation. Gathering an intergenerational mix under the guise of conversation and themes that are of interest and are the hungers of our young people, whether it's relationships, marriage, finances, church life, community service, meaningful work. These are all things that many of us as older adults have stories of all kinds to share. Stories of all kinds that can feed the hungry hearts and souls and minds and bodies of young adults. The chance to share a story in community and in intergenerational context is really powerful. And to do that with our faith life at the center of the conversation is a rare opportunity for young adults. So I'll be inviting many of you to participate in these, or if you would be thrilled to share some of the stories of your life, the ups and the downs, I would love to know so that we can have you as part of our house parties. In my ongoing search for fresh thinking with young adults, I came across an innovative community in Brooklyn, New York, St. Lydia's Dinner Church. Each week they gather for worship, which means preparing a meal, setting the table, blessing the bread with the most ancient Eucharistic prayer, eating a meal, hearing a sermon, sharing personal stories, and singing their way out. This community was started and is led by a young woman out of Yale Divinity School who is almost, but not yet, ordained. And it affiliates with 2 denominations, and it gathers in a Zen center. Another interesting idea. Our own seminary intern, Meredith Jackson, attended UNCO 2012 last week. This is a conference where people of all ages, but largely young adults, gather for 3 days of worship and open space discussion on the church and its future. With an eye towards intentional diversity and ecumenism, UNCO participants draw from the wealth of knowledge that's at the gathering. The leaders, the topics, and the workshops are not predetermined, but harvested from the present participants. Unconventional, powerful. I am encouraged to see that young adults hold up the belief that God has about each one of us. It's the belief that we are each uniquely gifted and therefore have something to contribute to the community. It's why the educational form of one expert imparting knowledge on a group of eager listeners has lost its dominance among young adults. Many younger folks would rather gather around a table and using the gifts present hopefully from an intergenerational gathering of folks, create an action plan and before even walking away, have a sense of their purpose. Our challenge then, as I see it, is to create a space or make an opening for the gifts to be known, named, and applied. Not doing so, we discount each other. We deny each other an affirmation of worth. We deny the sense of belonging to one another and to God. We deny the love that is needed for peace in this world. In the few years of Jesus' life when he was in public ministry, he was a young adult, a recent 20-something. He had an inconsistent schedule. He moved from place to place, and he was passionate about justice for all. This life was sustained by his trust in God and by the love and support of the community that traveled with him. So when Jesus broke bread on that last dinner they had together, and he asked his community to remember him, I can see our young adults gathered at that table. Some we know well, and many are unfamiliar faces. All are grief-stricken by the impending loss and deeply longing for that community of love and support that is there to live on, to travel with them and to sustain them through all their inconsistencies and all the uprootedness they will experience. The bread of life at this table is for them. From all of us who have stories of how we have been sustained by life in faithful community, and the stories that we remember together deep in our bones. This is the bread of life in new forms. For when Jesus can be seen and tasted and welcomed into the lives of the wilderness people, the uprooted and the disconnected, the wandering and grappling souls, we know the love of God is alive. We know there is food for eternal life. So I wish for us that we open our minds and our hearts and our bodies to new ways of gathering, communicating, and living together. And may we gather at a table and be fed by the gifts of each other, nourished and ready to feed the many hungers of the world. Amen.